Hey, Jess, are you ready for some more chicken chat today?
I am so ready for some more chicken chat.
Well, I'm excited because we are preparing for our chick minimums to go down here in April, that we can ship as few as 3 chicks. So we're going to get a whole lot more new chicken owners, new poultry owners coming into the homesteading farm game. And I figure we should chat a little bit about how to prepare for your new chicks, because preparation is key to being successful.
Absolutely. And we're kind of making a shopping list here today.
Well, and I love shopping.
Yeah, me too.
Shopping, chicks. I mean, what could be better?
Right, exactly, exactly. So what is the first thing that we need?
Well, we need to figure out where we're going to put these babies. They don't go in a crib. They don't go in the bedroom. They need a safe space, and it has to be warm. So we call that a brooder, and a brooder can be anything from a storage tote to I've used water troughs, obviously with no water in them. We've used wooden brooders that my husband has built. I mean, anything can be used as long as it can be sanitized before use. It protects from drafts, and it protects from any lurking predators, which can be as simple as a house cat.
Absolutely. And if this isn't your first year, if you're like me, you have serious chicken math and this repeats year after year, make sure you sanitize your brooder. So if you're using a brooder from last year, I usually give mine a good clean at the end of the season, and then I give it another really good clean at the beginning of the spring here.
Yeah, because they build up dust really quickly,
Yeah.
and dust has germs, and these babies are just hatched when they are shipped, and they haven't built up their immune systems yet, or when you've picked them up even. So you want to keep them in a nice, sterile environment.
For sure. So we've got our brooders. We have our house for our chicks. What else do we need?
We got to figure out what kind of bedding you're going to use.
Right.
I am a huge fan of pine shavings. I love the smell, that wood smell. They absorb moisture really well, so it keeps your babies dry, which is really key. Let's see. I have also used in the first couple of days some rubber shelf liner, because they're getting their bearings on those little teeny tiny legs, and you don't want anything that's going to be slippery, because they can easily slip a tendon, hurt their legs. So you want to create that nice firm space for them to walk on. But definitely after the first day or two, you're going to want to switch to something with some more absorption, like the wood shavings. But you use something kind of interesting. What was that?
Yeah. So my local feed store, and you can check your local feed store, there may be some other options. And I walked in the feed store one day and I smelled coffee, and I was like, what? And are they offering us coffee? No, they had coffee bedding. It was a special bedding that's made from recycled coffee. And that's what I use in my brooder, and my brooder smells like coffee.
That's amazing.
I really like it as somebody that I have lots of chickens, but I also have a lot of allergies. So I am mindful not only of my chicks' respiratory system, but mine as well. And I found that the coffee bedding, I don't have as much dust. So I kind of tend to find that if I can find it at the local farm store, I grab it. If not, I always jump over to those pine shavings.
And there's some newer bedding as well, like the hemp bedding and the corn cob bedding. So there's a lot of different options. You just choose what works best for you and your setup.
Right. Pine pellets. I've seen people use the pine pellet. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that one, I've used that in the past, and I've kind of waited until my chicks were over a week old. I wanted to make sure their legs were really, really strong before they started walking on that pine bed, or the pine pellet bedding.
Yeah, because I can see those rolling a little bit as their little feet walk across them.
Right. But it's a good absorber. So as they get older, you can definitely switch to that, especially when they start learning how to kick shavings.
Yeah, and they learn that so quickly.
Right, exactly.
And they always end up in the waterer.
Yes. And it amazes me how high they can get the chips too. I've seen them like up and over the edge of the brooder, and I'm like, what are you doing down there?
It's like an Olympic sport for chicks.
Right. Is there anything you could think of that we shouldn't use for bedding?
I wouldn't use cedar. Cedar has a very potent, oily smell that is not good for their lungs. So that's something I would stay away from. And then newspaper, because that's something that's super slick as well. So you want to prevent those little leg injuries by not putting a slick surface in there. And then I've seen like people set their brooder space like using a crate or some sort of dog cage setup with like a draft protector on top of like tile flooring. And that's risky as well because that can be slippery. Yeah. So I would definitely, if you're going to do that, use that rubber shelf liner to at least give them some grippy to walk on top of.
Absolutely. All right. So we've got our brooder and our bedding. What else do we need?
Well, we were talking about them kicking their shavings into the water. It's like a constant battle keeping those out of the water. Water is essential, and it needs to be provided at all times. So you need to figure out how you're going to provide water for your babies. A lot of times it's going to start out on top of whatever bedding that you're using. But I like to move mine up, put something underneath it to kind of raise it off the shavings or whatever bedding you're using. As they grow, it helps eliminate the battle of keeping the water clean. Unless you're raising ducklings, that's just going to be a battle no matter what.
Right, exactly.
But there's so many options. It just depends on how many babies you're brooding, what kind of space you're using. You can do a gallon gravity fed waterer, and then they have like the little quart jar waterers. If you're using Quail, you've done Quail before, right?
Yeah.
So what do you use for Quail?
There's actually a base that you can purchase that would go with kind of the quart waterers that's a little bit smaller, because the Quail are significantly smaller, and it prevents them from getting into their water or taking a swim in their water. I know you and I both add marbles into the waterers as well to prevent the chicks from getting inside the waterer. And I've even seen people use a nipple watering system with their chicks as well. So it really does depend on your setup.
Yeah. And I know we sell a really, really adorable little nipple waterer that sits, you just set it up inside your brooder. It's just kind of like something you'd put in like a guinea pig's cage.
Right. Exactly.
Just something really small, which is great for those brooding in a smaller space.
Absolutely.
And I know I've gotten the question before in customer service, when should I provide feed for my chicks? And it's a great question. I mean, if you're new to the chick game, they absorb the last portion of the yolk as they're hatching. So that keeps their bellies full for 72 hours. But as soon as you get them home, you're going to want to have feed available for them.
Absolutely. And with the grow gel that's included in your order with your chick orders, I know when I get the grow gel, I mix it up and I actually put it on top of their feed, kind of at a very thin layer, and it kind of draws them over to that feeder. So not only do you want to show your chicks where the feeder and water is, so take your little chick over there, dip their beak in the water and show them what their food is, but that grow gel, it draws them to the food, and they're like, hey, and they eat that pretty quickly, and then they realize that the even better, yummy, delicious chick feed is underneath it.
Yeah, and that grow gel is going to hydrate them a little bit better. It helps because, moving from that nice, tight, warm egg into a bigger space can be a bit stressful. So it really does help hydrate them and give them some extra electrolytes.
Yeah.
I like how you put it on top of the feed. That's a good idea.
Yeah, it kind of just draws them in. And one thing I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed this, but when I've gotten chicks from Meyer, so they've hatched for a few days, I noticed that they eat right away. They go straight to the water, straight to the feeder. If you've hatched chicks, you may notice that they take a little bit longer to start eating a lot. And it's because they've hatched, you're putting them straight into the brooder, and they may still be absorbing that yolk. So you want to keep an extra eye on them, but don't panic if you don't see them chowing down right away compared to your chicks that you've received, maybe from Meyer.
And feeders, where are you going to put your feed? Feeders can be so many different things. I tend to go with the Trough setup with the little roll bar on top. That way, if they perch on top of it, it kind of rolls, so it keeps them from perching. Because if they can perch on top, that means they're going to be pooping in their food, which is not the best thing. So I really like that roll bar. Yeah. I've used just a small bowl if I'm just brooding a few birds, to stick that in the corner. What do you tend to use, Jess?
I've used the little bowl with the quail, especially when they're really young, and then eventually kind of work them up. And I've used the gravity fed, the jar on top and the base on the bottom. And yes, I have to scoot them off sometimes, but it just fits perfectly into the brooders that I use. And as I raise my waterer, like we talked about, I raise the feeder as well. And that works out pretty good for my setup.
And they even have like the gravity fed bottom bases have little holes in them. Some of the setups have little holes. So it's just perfect for their little heads to get in. Absolutely. So they can't scratch the feed out, because just like the shavings, they go to town scratching that feed, and that can be pretty wasteful. So that'll help eliminate some waste.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've talked about the brooder and our food and our water and our bedding. Let's talk a little bit more about heat.
Oh yeah, it's definitely something that you really need to think about and plan for. When baby chicks hatch, they don't have feathers yet, and that's what helps them regulate their body temperatures. So it's essential to have a draft-free warm space. You're going to want to start them out at 95 degrees, and then each week after, you'll decrease that by 5 degrees until they're ready to go outside when they're fully feathered. A heat source can be anything from a heat lamp, designated specifically for brooding, or I like to use the brooder plates. One thing to keep in mind with the brooder plate, though, is it's not meant for brooding outdoors in cold weather. It's not enough heat to keep up, because yes, they're going to be warm underneath it, but as soon as they move outside of the brooder plate, they're going to get chilled really quickly if your outside temperatures are too cold.
Absolutely. And some of the brooder plates actually have, the way that they're set up, they will actually shut off if it gets too cold. So it kind of depends on the manufacturer of your brooder plate as well. So you definitely want to make sure your brooder is in a good warm place. And talking about the heat, when you're using, we talk about sometimes putting a thermometer into your brooder to check the temperature. And if you're using a heat plate, why can't we use the thermometer?
Because the temperature is actually, they're getting warm. It's like them sitting under the mother hen. You actually have to rub up against it to get the heat. So the heat's really not going to reach the floor of the brooder space.
Right. So it's more of an inductive kind of heat. So with that, you have to really watch your chicks, which is an excuse to go look at your chicks more often. But you really want to watch. If you notice that your chicks are really huddled together and they're peeping very loudly, then your chicks could be too cold, and you may need to adjust your brooder plate, or adjust the panels that maybe you have around your brooder. I know I like to put my brooder on a couple towels, just to kind of make sure that there is no chance for any cold to come up through the bottom. If you notice that your chicks are very spread out, they're way away from the heat source, and they're panting, then they're too hot, and you need to make the adjustment in your brooder.
I think the key here is that you need to be prepared to modify.
Yeah.
I know in the beginning, I brooded all of my baby chicks inside of the house. And of course, it was a very dusty situation. And as chicken math has gotten the best of me, I've had to promise my husband that I will no longer brood inside the house. So I brood in our barn. But with that, we live in Northeast Ohio. The temperatures are quite cool most of the time when we are brooding. Right. So I definitely have to be more watchful and modify a little bit more. I've moved up to the water trough brooder system because I tend to brood 25 to 50 at a time. I do like the heat plate. I'll put a heat plate inside of it, but I will also have a secondary heat lamp. And oftentimes, depending on the weather, I have to cover my brooder to kind of trap in some of that heat. And then like you, Jess, I've put towels underneath it just to kind of create like a barrier, because if I stick that water trough directly on the cement, it's quite cold. Right. So putting that barrier there will help. But, you know, I can't even tell you how many birds I've brooded, but I still put a thermometer in my brooder, because yes, you can watch their body language, but the for sure way to know your temperature and if it's good, especially if you're brooding outdoors where it can be more challenging, is to put a thermometer in there.
Right. And by outdoors, you mean in an enclosed area.
Absolutely.
In your barn or whatever.
Yeah. We're not doing it in the backyard, because then we're going to have some major draft issues.
Absolutely. Especially in Northeast Ohio. We never know from minute to minute what our temperatures are going to be.
Right.
So when I first started with chicks, I took the list that we just talked about, all these items, and I made sure I practiced. I set up my brooder a couple weeks before. As you can tell, I was really excited to get chicks, but I set up my brooder really far in advance. And, you do have to adjust as you go, but make sure you have everything ready before your chicks arrive, and make sure you turn that heat source on a couple days before. I kind of use when I get my tracking number email, I go and turn my brooder on and start to get things ready for my chicks.
Well, it's kind of like on a snowy day when you have to go from inside the warm house to the really cold car.
Yeah.
If you don't have your brooder preheated or your car preheated, you're going to sit in that car and you're going to shiver for the first 10 minutes while it warms up. So preheating your brooder is ideal because it's less of a shock to their system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think we have a really good shopping list here.
Yeah. And I think it's if you're doing this experience as a family, if you have young children, this is a great opportunity to teach them responsibility. Have them go shopping with you, have them help you make the list, have them prepare, make a science experiment out of making sure the temperature is right. It's just a great experience overall.
Yeah. Raising chicks is just the best.
It's rewarding.
It is
from start to finish.
Absolutely. And chicken math is real.
Yes.
So real.
If you are placing an order for your first 3 chicks this year, be prepared to place a order double, triple, quadruple the size next year.
And add ducks and turkeys
and quail.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you everybody for watching. We hope we've given you some great tips for getting your brooder ready for your new chicks. If you have any questions, be sure to visit us at meyerhatchery.com. As always, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and click that bell so you're the first to know every time a new video has been released. Thank you so much for watching.
Bye, guys.
Yay.